The day I became a time-traveling chicken. Alright, let me set the scene for you. It was a regular Wednesday morning, the kind where you spill coffee on your shirt, miss the bus by 3 seconds, and realize you left your wallet at home after ordering the largest sandwich on the menu. You know, the usual. I was at my wit's end when I decided to visit my eccentric neighbor, Dr. Melvin. He always had something weird and wonderful going on in his garage. Dr. Melvin, a retired physicist, had turned his garage into what can only be described as a mad scientist's playground. I knocked on his door, hoping to borrow some money for lunch, and was greeted by the unmistakable smell of burnt toast and something that reminded me of my high school chemistry lab, an odd mix of sulfur and despair. "Ah, just the person I wanted to see," Dr. Melvin exclaimed, pulling me inside before I could protest. His wild hair was even wilder today, and his lab coat had more stains than I cared to count. "Melvin, I just need a few bucks for—" "Nonsense, you need to try this." He pointed to a large, dome-shaped contraption in the middle of the room, wires and tubes sticking out of it like a bad hair day. "What is it?" I asked, already regretting my visit. "It's a time machine, of course," he said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. I laughed, thinking it was one of his pranks. "Yeah, right, and I'm a chicken." Without missing a beat, he grabbed a helmet with a bunch of blinking lights and plopped it on my head. "Precisely. Now, hold still." Before I could protest, he flipped a switch and the world around me blurred. I felt a weird sensation, like being pulled through a really tight tube. When everything finally stopped spinning, I found myself in an unfamiliar place. Gone was the cluttered garage, replaced by what looked like a prehistoric jungle. "Great, Melvin, where am I?" I muttered to myself. Then I noticed something strange. My hands were gone. Instead, I had wings, feathery wings. I looked down and saw a pair of skinny chicken legs. "Oh no," I clucked. Yes, clucked. I had indeed become a chicken. I wandered around the jungle, trying to figure out what had happened. My chicken brain was surprisingly calm though. Maybe it was the tiny size of my new brain, or maybe chickens are just naturally zen. Either way, I needed to find a way back to my human self. As I stumbled through the underbrush, I encountered a group of cavemen. They seemed as shocked to see me as I was to see them. One of them, a burly fellow with a beard that would make any hipster jealous, approached me cautiously. "Buck, buka," I said, hoping to sound friendly. He tilted his head, clearly confused, and then reached out to grab me. "Not today, buddy." I flapped my wings furiously and managed to escape his grasp. As I sprinted away, I realized that being a chicken wasn't so bad. I could run pretty fast, and the bugs I found were surprisingly tasty. Still, I missed my opposable thumbs. After what felt like hours, I found a shiny metallic object half buried in the ground. It was the time machine. I pecked at it frantically, hoping to activate it. Just as I was about to give up, the machine whirred to life and I was sucked back into that weird tube again. When I came to, I was back in Dr. Melvin's garage, human once more. The helmet fell off my head and I glared at Melvin, who was scribbling notes furiously. "Melvin, what the heck was that?" I demanded. He looked up, eyes wide with excitement. "Did it work? Did you travel through time?" "I turned into a chicken," I yelled. He nodded thoughtfully. "Fascinating. I'll need to adjust the settings, but think of the possibilities. We could send people back to observe history firsthand. Or turn them into farm animals," I muttered. Despite my ordeal, I couldn't help but laugh. It had been the weirdest day of my life, but also the most exciting. As I left Melvin's garage, I decided that maybe, just maybe, I'd visit him again. Who knows what kind of adventure awaited me next time? And as for my lunch, well, I'd never look at a chicken sandwich the same way again. Part 2. The day my cat became the mayor. I live in a small town where not much happens. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and the biggest news is when Old Man Jenkins's cows get loose again. But one summer day, something truly bizarre and hilarious happened. My cat, Whiskers, became the mayor. It all started when I found Whiskers lounging on the kitchen table, pawing at my laptop. He had somehow managed to open the town's website and was now staring intently at the screen. I laughed, thinking he was just being his usual curious self, until I saw what he had done. "Whiskers, did you just nominate yourself for mayor?" I asked, half joking. But there it was, plain as day. Whiskers the cat listed as an official candidate for the upcoming mayoral election. I quickly called the town clerk, Mrs. Henderson, to explain the situation, but she just chuckled and said, "Well, it's too late to change it now. He's on the ballot and the rules are the rules. Let's see how this plays out." I figured it would be a funny story to tell my friends, and that would be the end of it. But word spread like wildfire. The townspeople thought it was the best joke they'd ever heard and decided to run with it. Suddenly, posters of Whiskers started popping up everywhere. "Vote for Whiskers, the perfect candidate," they read. The more people joked about it, the more serious the campaign became. We even had a campaign headquarters set up in my living room. My best friend Tom became Whiskers' campaign manager, and every day people would drop by with suggestions for his platform. "Free catnip for all," declared Mrs. Johnson from down the street. "Mandatory nap times," suggested little Timmy, who was only 5 but very enthusiastic. It was all in good fun, and I figured there was no way Whiskers could actually win. But then the debates happened. The other candidates, Mr. Thompson and Miss Green, were seasoned politicians. But their serious discussions about zoning laws and budget allocations just couldn't compete with Whiskers' charm. During the debates, Whiskers would sit on stage, grooming himself or chasing a laser pointer. The audience loved it. Every time he did something cute, they cheered louder than ever. Election day came, and to everyone's astonishment, Whiskers won by a landslide. He was officially the new mayor of our town. I couldn't believe it. The first town meeting with Mayor Whiskers was unforgettable. Tom had set up a tiny desk with a nameplate that read Mayor Whiskers and a little gavel. As Whiskers sat there, occasionally swatting at a ball of yarn, the council members discussed the town's issues. Surprisingly, things started to get done. With no one taking themselves too seriously, people began to communicate more openly and honestly. Decisions were made quickly and efficiently. Whiskers' laid-back attitude seemed to inspire everyone to relax and work together. As the months went by, the town thrived under Whiskers' leadership. Parks were cleaned up, new businesses opened, and community events flourished. Whiskers, of course, took it all in stride, enjoying the occasional pat on the head and a steady supply of treats. One day, the governor even paid a visit to meet our famous feline mayor. The governor laughed so hard during the meeting that he declared our town the friendliest in the state. We received a grant for community improvement, and Whiskers became a local legend. Years later, people still talk about the time when a cat was mayor, and while Whiskers has since retired to a life of luxury, mostly sleeping and eating, his impact on our town remains. We've learned to find humor in the unexpected and to embrace the quirky and the unconventional. As for me, I've become known as the guy whose cat became mayor, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Life in our small town is never dull, and I owe it all to Whiskers, the perfect mayor. Part 3. The Great Squirrel Heist. You know those days when you think nothing extraordinary will happen today? That was my mindset one sunny Saturday morning. I was just looking forward to a lazy day of lounging and maybe mowing the lawn if I felt particularly ambitious. Little did I know, I was about to be swept up in the most bizarre heist my sleepy neighborhood had ever seen. It all started when I noticed something odd while pouring my morning coffee. My bird feeder, usually teeming with sparrows and finches, was empty. Not just devoid of birds, but completely devoid of seed. I had filled it to the brim the previous evening, so this was a bit of a mystery. Determined to get to the bottom of this avian mystery, I grabbed my binoculars and settled into my kitchen chair, ready for some hardcore bird watching. After about an hour of nothing, I saw them, squirrels, not just any squirrels, but a whole gang of them moving with a level of coordination that would make Navy SEALs jealous. There were 5 of them, each with a specific role. The leader, a hefty gray squirrel with a torn ear, seemed to be in charge. He barked out orders, well, it sounded like barking to me, and the other 4 sprang into action. One squirrel acted as the lookout, perched high in the oak tree, keeping an eye out for any intruders, like me. 2 others were the muscle, gnawing at the feeder's metal casing with astonishing tenacity. The last one was the bagman, ready to scoop up the spoils and dash off with them. I watched in stunned silence as they executed their plan flawlessly. In less than 10 minutes, the feeder was emptied and the squirrels disappeared into the trees, chittering triumphantly. Well, I wasn't going to let a bunch of rodents outsmart me. I headed to the hardware store and picked up a squirrel-proof bird feeder, or so the packaging claimed. It had all sorts of features: weight-sensitive perches, a cage-like design, and even a spinning mechanism to fling off any unwanted visitors. Feeling smug, I installed the new feeder and filled it with seed, ready to outwit my furry foes. The next morning, I set up my post by the window, waiting for the show. Sure enough, the squirrel gang returned. They approached the new feeder cautiously, sniffing and prodding it. The leader looked particularly annoyed, as if he'd seen this model before and knew it wouldn't be easy. The lookout gave a sharp whistle, and the team got to work. The muscle squirrels tried to chew through the cage, but the metal was too tough. The bagman attempted to reach through the bars, but the openings were too small. It looked like my new feeder was going to win the day. Then the leader did something unexpected. He disappeared for a moment and returned with a length of wire. With surprising dexterity, he threaded it through the bars and hooked it onto the spinning mechanism. He gave a nod to the others and they all pulled at once. The feeder spun wildly, seeds flying everywhere like confetti. The squirrels danced around, catching the falling seed with glee. I watched, mouth agape, as they cleaned up every last morsel and scampered off, leaving the feeder spinning uselessly in the breeze. Defeated but impressed, I decided it was time to admit defeat. Clearly, these squirrels were masterminds, and I was no match for their cunning. I started buying extra birdseed, filling a separate feeder just for them. They deserved it after all. Word of my squirrel gang spread through the neighborhood, and soon everyone was talking about them. They became local celebrities. Kids would come by just to watch them in action. Someone even started a YouTube channel dedicated to their exploits. Years later, as I sit on my porch, watching the next generation of squirrels carry on the legacy, I can't help but smile. They may have outsmarted me, but they brought a lot of joy and laughter to our little corner of the world, and who knows, maybe someday they'll pull off an even bigger heist. But for now, they're just my cheeky, lovable neighbors, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Let me tell you another story. The day I accidentally started a cult. It all began innocently enough, as most bizarre adventures do. I was at a local flea market, rummaging through a pile of old books and knickknacks, when I stumbled upon a dusty, leather-bound journal. The cover was embossed with an intricate design that caught my eye. For $1, it seemed like a steal, so I bought it without hesitation. Later that evening, I settled into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea and opened the journal. To my surprise, it was filled with handwritten notes, sketches, and what appeared to be recipes. But these weren't ordinary recipes for cookies or casseroles. No, these were for strange concoctions and rituals with names like Elixir of Enlightenment and Potion of Persuasion. Intrigued, I decided to try one out. The ingredients for the Elixir of Enlightenment were simple enough: chamomile tea, honey, and a few herbs I had in my spice cabinet. I followed the instructions carefully, brewing the mixture and sipping it slowly. It tasted pleasant enough, but I didn't feel particularly enlightened. I shrugged and went to bed, thinking nothing more of it. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of text messages and missed calls. Apparently, I had posted a video on social media the night before, proclaiming the discovery of a miraculous elixir that could unlock the secrets of the universe. The problem was, I had no memory of making the video. Confused and slightly horrified, I watched the video. There I was, looking completely earnest and slightly manic, talking about the journal and the incredible powers of the Elixir of Enlightenment. The video had gone viral overnight. People from all over the world were commenting, sharing, and even asking where they could get the ingredients. I decided to take the video down and issue an apology, explaining that it was all a misunderstanding. But before I could, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a group of people standing on my porch, holding notebooks and wearing hopeful expressions. "Are you the enlightened one?" a woman asked, her eyes wide with excitement. What?" I stammered. "We saw your video," she explained. "We've come to learn from you. Please, share your wisdom." I tried to explain that it was all a mistake, but they were insistent. They wanted to know more about the elixir and the other recipes in the journal. Before I knew it, I had a small crowd gathered in my living room, eagerly awaiting my teachings. Not knowing what else to do, I decided to humor them. I read aloud from the journal, explaining the various potions and rituals as best I could. To my surprise, they hung on every word, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. Over the next few weeks, more and more people showed up at my house. They brought offerings of food, flowers, and even money, thanking me for sharing my wisdom. My living room became a makeshift classroom, and I found myself leading daily sessions on everything from herbal remedies to meditation techniques. As absurd as it was, I began to enjoy my role as the accidental guru. The people who came to see me were kind and enthusiastic, and they genuinely seemed to benefit from the things I was teaching them. I even started to believe that maybe there was something special about the journal after all. One day, a reporter showed up at my door, wanting to do a story on the Enlightened One and the growing movement. I reluctantly agreed, figuring it would be a good opportunity to set the record straight. During the interview, I explained how it had all started as an accident and that I was just a regular person who happened to find an interesting book. The article was published, and while it did attract even more attention, it also helped to clarify that I wasn't some kind of messiah. People continued to come, but now with a more realistic understanding of what I was offering. Eventually, I decided it was time to step back and return to my normal life. I handed over the journal to a local historian who was fascinated by its contents, and I thanked my followers for their support and encouragement. Many of them stayed in touch, and we remained friends long after the cult had disbanded. Looking back, it was one of the strangest and most unexpected chapters of my life. I never set out to start a movement or become a guru, but sometimes life has a way of surprising you. And while I'm glad to be back to my quiet, ordinary existence, I'll always have a soft spot for that crazy, enlightening adventure.